welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, How to Get It Just Right. Thank you so much for joining us. And you are going to be thrilled with today's conversation. Today's guest is a friend of Goldilocks who's been on it in the past, an author and a friend of the community. Karen Ann Bulluck, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Thank you, Dr. Kas, for having me today. I'm very excited to be here, and it's been a while since I've joined your community, so I'm glad to be part of it again.
Beautiful. We're living in an age where trust is a huge unknown. Can I trust myself? Can I trust what I know? Can I trust my life is going to be okay? Can I trust I'm safe in my neighborhood? Can I trust I can go to the grocery store? Can I trust I'm safe in my country? So many different questions around trust, not just at the workplace, but in our personal life, within ourselves, in a country, in a global society. So today's conversation is going to be centered around that, but we're going to have it in a very fun kind of way. So, Karen, as we kick this off, take a moment and share with us why you wrote this book and why you wrote it as a story.
Well, trust is such a thorny issue these days, as you put it. I mean, there's trust issues for so many people on so many different levels, and I think we learn through stories, and it's easier to explore through stories. The characters in the book have different scenarios that they're dealing with trust issues, and I like to do it in a story format because you can people can put themselves in that situation, and it helps them explore for themselves as well.
I absolutely love that perspective, Karen, because as professional women, we also know in the workplace, it's easier to have a conversation and get people engaged when it's not about them and it's a story. And as women who have been married for a long time, we also know it's easier to influence the family members, especially our spouses, if it's a story, right? So I love the
Absolutely.
fact that you've taken all of that wisdom and then centered the story about trust. Can you talk a little bit about why the three characters and what the characters are to set up the background?
Sure. So the main character, Cheryl, who's the heroine of this is the third book in a series. So it's she's the heroine of all three of the books. She is she's a CIO, Chief Information Officer. So she's dealing with the advent of AI in her organization and all the various trust issues that come around that, as well as her relationship with her husband is on shaky ground and has been. And she's trying to figure out, okay, can I trust him again? Because she really is very hesitant to do so. The second woman in the series is Alicia. She was also a main character in the second book. She got herself into some really hot water by lying, basically. And now she's got to figure out how do I rebuild trust when nobody in my organization trusts me anymore? And that's really challenging. And then the third woman, Gemma, is starting a new job. She's left a long-term employment. She's in a new place, and she's trying to figure out, okay, can I trust these people? And who of the people in this new organization can I trust? Which, is something we always encounter when we go into new situations.
Very much so. So if we take character by character and dive into the trust context it's dealing with, I think that will help our audience kind of put themselves in it. So let's take the main character, Cheryl, and she's dealing with two different issues of trust. Let's start with role, the role of Chief Information Officer and the age of AI.
Well,
Research shows that AI, you can only trust 33 to 34% of the time. The rest of it is wrong. And yet, so many organizations are jumping into it. Talk to us about how she is unpacking that and dealing with that.
well, there's a couple of different things that she's dealing with it. One is, she's on the board of directors. She's got fellow board members that are, very much wanting to jump on that AI bandwagon and say, okay, great, we can just eliminate half of the programming staff, we can cut head count, we can just roll AI in. And so part of her dilemma is how does she educate them in a way that is understandable, and how does she communicate the value of human beings to these people who just want to replace everything with an AI bot. And then, of course, then the other thing is she's got staff members that are like, okay, we hear the rumors that there's going to be layoffs and, AI can't do everything, but we think we're going to be replaced. How does she encourage them and build, maintain trust with them when they're afraid? I mean, which many employees are in today's world, they're afraid. And how does a leader try to reassure people in that situation?
Interesting, because this is real for everybody on all sides of the conversation. How does she? How does she succeed? Or does she?
Well, she partially succeeds, because again, I wanted to keep it to the real world, and we don't always get totally what we want in the real world. But what she does is she builds relationships with people she does trust, that come alongside her as allies and come up with other alternatives to, meet the bottom line, that the investors are trying to push her towards. And the other thing that she does is she does some deep dive into, AI, what it's capable of. Like you said, what can you trust? And I thought there was the third piece of what she does is she finds, and I will admit to using this in the book, a post from Ariana Huffington from the Huffington Post about, AI and the human spirit, and really understanding what we as humans bring to the table. And it really is our spirit and our creativity and all of the things that AI can never be.
And that is the sad reality most people who are chasing the dollars don't get.
Yeah.
And the bigger reality is if everybody is replaced with AI and people don't have disposable income, what is being produced for whom? Because AI is not going to consume. So,
Exactly. The AI thing is so nuanced on so many fronts.
yeah, so
Um,
it's interesting. I am waiting to see where this goes because AI is not going to buy anything, goods or services. So we are living in an interesting time. So let's pivot to Cheryl's second dilemma, the
Her
trust
husband.
issue in the marriage. And the book deals with trust in marriage, not even as a physical affair, but as an emotional affair.
Mhm.
Talk to the audience a little bit about what does that mean? Because in a lot of cultures, for a lot of women, it's the physical that becomes cheating.
Yeah. So in book two, in pursuing trust and pursuing truth, uh, Cheryl finds out that her husband, has this pretty intense relationship with Alicia, who's one of the other, women in the book. And it's not, it never crosses that boundary into physical. But Alicia, gets close enough to him to start to have assumptions about what their relationship is. And, he realizes after a while that he has fed into these assumptions, right? I mean, she hasn't come up with them in a vacuum. And it is sort of in Pursuing Truth, it sort of explores the whole dynamics of that kind of workplace relationship where you've got, your workplace husband or wife. We joke about that. And sometimes that can be very healthy, but it can also get really dicey if one person has different expectations. And so Cheryl's husband has not only, engaged in this whole situation with this other woman who, that situation gets out of control, but he's also been less than supportive about what she wants to do in the workplace too. So there's two aspects of her saying, is he really on my side? And, where do we go now that he's really broken her trust with this whole situation with Alicia. And even after you know, even after just an emotional affair, there's still that deep, um, trust that's been broken. That expectation that you've got your spouse's, you know, support and soul emotional, not, you know, I'm not describing this very well, but you want to be the only woman in your husband's life, right? And so she's really struggling with, how do I get back to the point where I can really wholeheartedly put myself back into this marriage, because she's sort of, as many of us do, got one foot on either side of the fence.
Mhm. That's an interesting perspective as a South Asian woman raised in a culture where men and women can be friends and friends for life in a very close, emotional, and supportive way without being spouses, because it's not a dating culture, or I didn't grow up when it wasn't a dating culture when I grew up. And in the Western world, what you said is true. And my American husband had to get used to the fact that I have friends. Yes, they're in a foreign country. When we go home, we stay with one of these guys, with their families, with their wives, with their kids, right? So it's largely cultural, because not every culture looks at mixed gender relationships as cheating, because in my part of the world, we believe that it's very important for people to have strong, authentic, trusted relationships with people of other gender that
And
are
and
platonic.
and I agree with you. Honestly, I have close male friends. I always have. And this relationship, though, went beyond just a friendship. This relationship went to, she actually moved to, the state where they lived in. She was buying a house and she thought he was going to move in with her. I mean, it went to the point where she had expectations that this relationship was going to be different. And that's a fine line. And I think in our workplace relationships, that can be a very fine line, where we have close friendships with people that are of the other gender and that are healthy and emotionally supportive and all of those things. But then where does that become a substitute for your spouse? Where are you, betraying your spouse's trust by maybe, obviously Dave talked to her to the point of view where she felt like, okay, their marriage is on the rocks and I can just swoop in here, right? So, there's some fine, there can be some interesting dynamics with mixed gender relations, friendships.
These days, it could be in the same gender too for the same reasons.
It's very true, very true. But
So
yeah.
it's technically not, but my bigger question is, and might be interesting for the audience, how does the man in the story deal with it? Because he has some responsibility for all sides of that
Yeah, and he does take responsibility for that eventually.
eventually.
Eventually, he does take responsibility for it, because he realizes that he's created a situation where he's given, this woman mixed messages about the state of his marriage and his availability for a romantic relationship.
So let's look at the last third story. What what would you think is the most relevant for everyday woman from this third story? The third
Well,
character in the story.
the real dilemma that she has when she moves to a company is that the company expects her to kind of spill the dirt on her previous company. And there's a difference between sharing one's expertise and giving away confidential information from a previous employer. And that's really the biggest dilemma that she struggles with as she gets to know the culture there, because there's expectations that she's going to bring more than just her expertise to the company. And it's uncomfortable.
Mhm. And that's a double-edged sword, right? If you expect your employees to bring content and proprietary information of another company, you should expect everybody working for you to do the same when they go to their next job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So she's got to figure out, can I do this? And then if she can't, she's given up a long-term job. What does she do next?
So March is a month celebrating women. We
Yes.
are having this conversation on the weekend that is designated to celebrate women. I'm a believer that we don't need a designated day if we treat women right and give them equality and give them the opportunity not just to do what they want to do, but allow them not to do the things they don't want to do. To me, the real freedom for a woman is not to do the things she doesn't want to do. And instead of being pressurized by society and family and the entire surrounding. What message do you, as the author, want to give women?
Well, ultimately, I first of all, I agree with you about we shouldn't need a day to celebrate celebrate women because we should be all celebrated all the time. But I think as women, to your point, trusting yourself to being able to say no when you need to say no. I mean, that's what Gemma's dilemma is, right? She's in a situation where she feels like she should say no, but she doesn't know whether she can because of expectations, from her family, from, herself, from, the people around her. And I think trusting yourself enough to say no at times and to staying true to yourself is really the message that comes throughout the whole series of books
Mhm.
that I wrote with these women. Because to your point, the biggest freedom is being able to say no.
Absolutely. And that's part of boundary setting. If
Mhm.
I can't set boundaries and contain what I am willing to do within those boundaries, then I'm tacitly giving permission to people to do whatever.
Yes, yes, absolutely, 100%.
How can people get a hold of your book, read the trilogy? I'm going to call it a trilogy because they're three books. How can they read the trilogy and how can they engage with you?
Well, the trilogy is all available on Amazon. The first two books are available on other web booksellers also, but right now the third one is only on Amazon. You can easily find them by Googling, by searching for my name on Amazon. That's the easiest way to find them. And if you want to get in touch with me, my website is daringtotranscend.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn all the time.
Thank you so much, Karen. It has been a delightful conversation, and I would love to open it up to an audience. And I'm delighted to say that two of our co-authors from a book from a few years ago are here to support you and have this conversation. So go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, jump in. Great to see you, Karen. How fun. It's like a family reunion here.
It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, and congratulations on three books. That's amazing, really amazing. And a trilogy, no less. So that's the challenging, keeping the storyline running all the way through. So I'm looking forward to it. I will say regarding the second topic that sometimes an emotional affair is worse than a physical affair. And there's a whole 12-step program built around people who have one emotional affair after another.
Yeah.
And the trust can be rebuilt. It just takes a lot of work on both sides. And, first of all, for the partner who's having the emotional affair to recognize, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah.
I need to do something about this. So that's very true. And I just ask you, in terms of your writing, um, was there a central point that you were trying to follow throughout, or did the story kind of just come to you? As I've heard from different authors, that the story just comes to them and just it plays out. So, what degree did it come to you and it played out versus you having to create things?
It mostly comes to me and plays out. When I started the first book, I really wanted to write about integrity in the workplace and bringing, you know, spirituality into the workplace from her perspective, which she does in that book. But that book, in the process of writing that book, it left some loose ends that people were saying, okay, well, I want to know what happened to this part of it, right? And so it just kind of it took on a life of its own, to your point. The way I write is I generally hear the dialogue first. That's sort of the basis of my writing. So I'll hear the conversations between the characters, sort of capture them, and then, build the story around what's going on there. So that's the part I have to kind of create, but the story itself comes through the characters.
Awesome. It's great. And I'll say one other thing is that no matter what organization you go to, you're going to have issues. And
Mhm.
so before leaving an organization, see, are there things I can do to help improve the situation? Not just saying, oh, the grass is greener on the other side. In fact,
Yes.
that correlates to the second issue, is that sometimes people they're unhappy in a relationship, and so they leave, and then they marry the same person, just with a different face. And it happens over and over and over again until
Yes, it
finally they realize, oh, let's see, what's the common denominator here? What do I need to change? And so obviously there's some very toxic workplaces that would take significant remediation to figure out. But in many instances, the workplace is actually okay. There's just going to be a few adjustments. And so anyway, but don't think that just leaving the job and getting a new one is immediately going to solve all your problems. So
exactly, exactly. And I think, Gemma gets lured away by by promises, right? Oh, this is going to be so much better, and you're going to have so much more money, and you're going to have so much more of this and that and the other thing. And it's easy to fall prey to that, that flattery and that uh the lure of something bigger and better. We it's very easy to fall prey to that. And it's
yeah,
not always what it
absolutely.
seems. To your point, it's not always what it seems.
So that's an interesting point you ladies bring up. The ease of getting lured is directly predicated to not being centered in our core.
Yep.
If we're grounded in our core, then we know what we want, we know what we accept, and therefore we don't get lured. So this remedy is actually in connecting with ourselves and finding ourselves and knowing what I will and will not do and what my peace, my happiness, my success looks like, right? So that is something most people don't do. They're too busy chasing. And when you're chasing, you're always behind. You never catch up. So that's interesting.
I love that way of putting it. And I think, Gemma has gone through some recent upheaval in her life. And sometimes when we're not, to your point, when we're not in a centered, stable place, we're more susceptible to the lure of something that almost is too good to be true, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robin, for that amazing set of questions. Go ahead, Dr. Menon.
I just thought it was really interesting, your play on trust, and I really love what you just talked about, Dr. Kas and Karen, about bringing in that aspect of self knowledge of yourself and centering yourself, because my question was going to be, and it's already been partially answered, on how, because normally when I've noticed a lack of trust in a relationship, whether it's work or otherwise, it's because I'm not centered and I don't know what I'm wanting in that moment,
Hmm.
right? And so, so that was one aspect that's already been answered. And the second aspect for me is your book is basically, from what I could gather from all three scenarios, is talking about people who've been in your life for a long time and people whom you are going to have in your life for a long time, like your colleagues. And being in healthcare, a lot of times I walk into a room and I don't know someone and I need them to trust me so I can do surgery,
Yeah.
you know? And so I was wondering how that might be different, or do you feel, I know authenticity, like walking in with authenticity is part of trust, right? And
Hmm.
so I was wondering if you had any comments on defensiveness because we're not feeling trust in that moment, and how do we switch from defensiveness, recognizing it and flipping it to being authentic in that moment?
It's a great question. And I think Cheryl is the most evolved of the of the characters, partially because she's been through all the stories. But one of the things that she does regularly in her practices, and people, she does it in the book, is take the time to center herself. Take the time to, whether it's meditate or do somatic breathing or do those things before she goes into new situations or confrontational situations where she's likely to get defensive. She uses those tools to get herself in a place where she's going to be more responsive versus reactive. And I think, to circle back to what, Dr. Cass and Robin and I were, talking about too, it is part of just being centered in yourself. And you need to use the tools and be conscious about doing that. Otherwise, to your point, it's very easy to get defensive. So if you went into a situation where you were defensive, you're not going to build trust. But if you're centered in yourself and confident in yourself, you're going to be less likely to be reactive and put people off. You'll build more trust.
What insightful questions. I'm loving this conversation. And Dr. Menon, I appreciate you bringing the question of authenticity. There's so much modern research that shows that the highest form of energy frequency is not love, it's authenticity. Authenticity is 3 times more powerful than love. And
Wow.
therefore, when we walk into a room in our authentic power, we are creating energy that shifts the dynamics. And that to me is the singular takeaway, right? If we want to build trust, we need to be authentic at all times. That authenticity is not subjective. Too many people say, oh, this is how I'm at work. This is how I'm at home. This is how I'm in society. Then you're not authentic in any of those places. How do you remain true to who you are and show up authentically and create that energy to build trust? That becomes the $1 million question, right? If there could be a tablet for it, I think you'd sell more of it, Karen, than a weight loss drug, right?
Oh, 100%. No. And I think, to your point, I think that's one of the main struggles, in Cheryl's character arc throughout this whole series is how does she be authentic in the
Yeah.
workplace when there's so much pressure not to be? I mean, realistically, there's so much pressure not to be.
And so I just want to ping a point in here where, when you say that, you can be, I think, personally, I think you can be a different person or a different part of yourself comes to the front in different situations, and you can still be authentic but different, and so long as internally, as what you said, Kas, you are centered and you understand that you are prioritizing the need to care for the other person's point of view or the other person's emotion over your own need to project whatever it is that you might usually project in a home environment versus a business environment. And so long as we are making a choice to prioritize that part of us in that moment, do you think that would be still authentic to ourselves?
In my opinion, yes. I think what you're saying
Yeah.
is being authentic, and I think this is something that people get confused about sometimes. Being authentic doesn't mean like spilling your guts and showing your underwear in public, right? It's not that, and we can still be in integrity with ourselves, with our authentic selves. Um, and to your point, show a different part of yourself in different situations appropriately. I mean, you don't share your deepest, darkest secrets with, in a public setting versus you would with your spouse. But those deepest, darkest secrets aren't necessarily what make you authentic. And I think people get confused sometimes between authenticity, acting in integrity with who you are versus, spilling your guts.
Mhm. And it's a matter of consistency, right? If
Hmm.
I am authentically somebody who has kindness and compassion and cares about being in the right place and being centered in that place to do the right thing, then I'm not going to go to work and downsize everybody and say, please don't take it personally, it's business. Right? What
Yes.
I would do is, you know what? This is something we have to do for business, but I truly understand how this is going to impact you, me, all of us.
Yeah.
So let's come up with a plan on how we're going to support you through this beyond what the company is going to do. And let's put a plan together because I'm going to stay with you through this.
Yeah.
Right? That is authenticity.
Yes.
Having been a finance executive, gone through so much downsizing, technology related transformations, my employees keep in touch with me to this day. Why? Because what we did in business didn't take away how we engaged in the process as authentic human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging that is courageous, but it also allows us not to end up in a place where we don't trust each other.
I'll throw in
Yes.
something right there, Cass. Uh, I had one of my co-presenters, and we were talking about what does a humane organization look like. And he shared that when COVID hit his company, the entire executive team took a 50% pay cut so that they could keep people on. And when they did have to let someone off, they continued paying for their health care for another year and a half so that at least they didn't have to worry about that. And compare that to a hotel chain I will not name because I got chastised for naming it publicly one time. Um, they laid off 40% of their workforce during COVID, and yet the president got a $55 million, bonus. And so you contrast those two situations, and there was something about internally about those different sets of people that chose a different path during COVID, even though they were faced with the exact same problem.
This is
Well,
fascinating conversation. I honestly think we should come back and continue the conversation on authenticity.
I would love to.
There we go.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Karen. This has been an amazing and delightful reunion for us. Dr. Manon and Robin, thank you so much for joining to
Yeah.
enhance this conversation. And to our audience out there, the crux of all of this is centering on yourself, getting connected to your authentic self, and having the courage to show up in your authentic self. And therefore, allow the energy that you bring to every situation, build the trust you need to lead your life of success and authenticity. So go out there and find your inner Goldilocks moment, right? How to get it just right and live your life just right so that all the pieces do fall into place.